This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
For our final speaker tonight, it's a tremendous chus for us to have, for the first time for our Beis Medresh, Rabbi Glatstein Shlita, a renowned Rav from Cedarhurst, historian and Mechaber Svarim, Mechaber the Sifrei, Magid Arakia, and also the author of a brand new art scroll that came out this year, already a bestseller. Tremendous chus to introduce Rabbi Glatstein, Achron Chodesh.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would go with the bestseller, but somebody sitting next to me on the screen has a. It's an honor to be even in the running. You know, when you're the closing pitcher, so it depends. When you're in a tight game, so the closing pitcher is critical to the game. But when you have an all-star lineup and the game's already out of hand, so you put in, you just finish off the job. So you know, when you're the last speaker, in order to make sure that you're not speaking about a topic that other people already spoke about, so you always have to pick something original. This way, you know, there's usually good reason why nobody ever suggested this idea, but be it as it may, I would like to share with you what I think is a revolutionary perspective of the structure of Haggadah Shel Pesach, and let's focus in on the story of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfa, and Shali Mesubim b'Vnei Brak. It's interesting, in the entire Torah Shebal Peh, there are only two stories of Haggadah. You have the story in Haggadah Shel Pesach, you have the story of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, and then you have a Tosefta. So here's my question. You have these five Tanoim. These are probably five of the most eminent Tanoim of that era. But the Gadol Hadar is conspicuously absent from that story. I mean, who's the Nasi at the time? Who's the Nasi in the time of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shua? Of course, Ram Gamliel. Ram Gamliel is the Nasi. Where in the world is Ram Gamliel at that Seder? I mean, these five Tanoim are not all from the same city. They obviously gathered together to be together for Haggadah Shel Pesach, for Leil Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. So where's the Gadol Hadar? Where's the Nasi? Why wasn't Ram Gamliel there? And amazingly, the other record of a Seder night is in a Tosefta in Psachim, where the Tosefta tells us that Ram Gamliel was gathered with the Chachamim in Lud, and he did something very different the night of the Seder than Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfa. And what did he do? The Gemara says he was talking about Hilchos Pesach the whole night. So we already have two different approaches to what to do the night of Yitzias Mitzrayim. The five Tanoim in Bnei Brak, they're Mesaprim b'Yitzias Mitzrayim. They're telling the narrative, they're telling the story. And Gamliel, he didn't say a word about the story. He's not talking about the miracles. He's learning halacha. So, first of all, why is Ram Gamliel not at that historic Seder with the other five Tanoim? And secondly, why do we have these two streams, these two approaches to what one should be doing the night of the Seder? Now, the next passage in the Haggadah, by the way, is an amazing thing. Reb Chaim Falaji says he counted the chapters of Magid, and he came out with exactly 50 chapters of Magid, and that's because Tikkun Zayar says, the Gra quotes in many places, that it says in the Tanakh, it says in the Chumash 50 times Yitzias Mitzrayim, because had we remained there a moment longer, we would have fallen to the point of no return to the Shar Nun. And when Hashem extricated us, He took us out of all 50 levels. So that's why it says Yitzias Mitzrayim 50 times in the Chumash. That's why there are 50 passages in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. But the next passage is Amar Eliezer ben Azaria, Harei ani kven shivim shana. If you look in the Girsa of the Rambam, after Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, he brings what he considers the authentic text of Haggadah Shel Pesach. The Rambam changes one word of our text of the Haggadah. Instead of Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, the Girsa of the Rambam is Amar Lohem Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria. Which means like this: according to the Rambam, at that historic Seder, with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria and Rabbi Tarfa and Rabbi Akiva, at that historic Seder, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria turns to them and he says, my entire life I can never convince the Chachamim that you have to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim in the nighttime, until Ben Zoyma came along, and finally I was able to impose my Shita. So it's amazing, we all know, that if Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria is saying, Harei ani kiven shivim shana, that means this was when he was 18 years old, and he was promoted and appointed to be the Nasi of Klal Yisrael. That means that story of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria and Rabbi Akiva Tarfon happened on the day that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria became the Nasi. So we're all familiar with the backstory. The backstory is, the question came into the Beis Medresh, is Marav a Rashus or is Marav a Chayv? Rabbi Yeshua gets up, he says, Marav is a Rashus. Rabbi Gamliel comes in, they asked him, Rabbi Gamliel says, Marav is a Chayv. Rabbi Gamliel says, does anybody argue on me? No, nobody argues on Rabbi Gamliel. Nobody would dare ever argue on Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel's approach was that he ruled with an iron fist. This was in the aftermath of Churban Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Gamliel held, in order to establish authority in Klal Yisrael and ensure the stability of the people in the aftermath of the Churban, he ruled with great authority. He didn't let anybody disagree with him. Already on previous occasions when Rabbi Yeshua tried to disagree with Rabbi Gamliel put Rabbi Yeshua down. In fact, this is the third occasion that Rabbi Yeshua was, so to speak, put down in the presence of Gamliel. The people got angry at Rabbi Gamliel. The people said enough already with Rabbi Gamliel imposing his authority, and they actually demoted Rabbi Gamliel and they excommunicated him. And on that day, they didn't know who should be the next Nasi. It couldn't be Rabbi Yeshua, he's the Baal HaMaisa. It can't be Rabbi Kiva, he doesn't have Schos Avos. So they appointed Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, which means the historic Seder recorded in the Haggadah was the day Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria was appointed as the Nasi. And that's indicated, by the way, by the position of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria in that Mishnah. It's Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria ranked third in the middle. There's a klal. Whenever you have a list of Tanoim, the middle Tana is Gadol Shebekulan. The flanking him on the right and left is Rabbi Yeshua, as the Av Bezin. On the left is Rabbi Kiva, the Gadol Adar. And then further, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Tarfon. So that means Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria is ranked number third. He's the Nasi. And now we understand why Ram Gamliel was not at that Seder. Of course he's not at the Seder. He's in Chayram. He's already Mibachutz. They already demoted him. So that explains why Ram Gamliel was not at that Seder. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria at that Seder, he said, finally I could breathe. For the last 20 years, I come to the Beis Medresh, I can't get a word in. Ram Gamliel always imposes his viewpoint. It's the first time I could impose my viewpoint and say there's a chiyuv to speak about Yetzias Mitzrayim, Ba'leilas, and I don't have Ram Gamliel overriding me. Now, this is Oyoim V'Noira. I believe that it is critical to begin Haggadah Shel Pesach that Ram Gamliel has been demoted as the Nasi and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria is at the helm. Why? Because we know Ram Gamliel had the following policy. He would wait at the door, he would take a look at you, he would peer into your soul, and he would say, you know what? You're not that genuine, you're not that real, please stay out. Ram Gamliel would see into your soul if you're toichai kabarai, whether your inside matched your outside. And if it didn't, he wouldn't let you in. Ram Gamliel said, Kol Talmid she'ein toichai kabarai al yikanis Beis HaMedresh. Now I ask you a question. It's Leil Seder. You're bringing your kids to the table. You have all kinds of kids. There's a Chacham, there's a Rasha, there's a Tam, there's a She'eni Yodei Lishal. You think they're all coming into the house with Gamliel at the helm? You think Ram Gamliel is letting everybody into the Beis Medresh? We all know the day Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria became the Nasi, so they added either 400, 700 benches. All the Banim entered the Beis Medresh when Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria was appointed. So it's critical that the Haggadah begins. There's a new man at the helm. His name is Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria. And under his authority, everyone into the house. You could be a Chacham, a Rasha, a Tam, a She'eni Yodei Lishal. Because under the authority of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, it's Nitoisu Hasapsalim. Ram Gamliel cannot be at the helm. In other words, when you're presiding over your Seder, if you want to know which Mahalach to use, you have to use the Mahalach of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria the night of the Seder, and not that of Ram Gamliel. But it's amazing that the end of the story is, Ram Gamliel comes to ask to ask Mechila from Rabbi Hoshua, who it seems that he insulted. And Rabbi Gamliel says, please be Meichel me. Rabbi Hoshua said no. And Rabbi Gamliel said, please be Meichel me, Leman Kvoid Avi, in the honor of my father. And Rabbeinu Nissim said, who's the honor of the father that Rabbi Gamliel was invoking? Rabbeinu Nissim says, he meant Hillel Hazaken. So think about it. Does Rabbi Gamliel ever come back into the Seder? Of course he does. At the end of Magid, Rabbi Gamliel's back at the helm. Rabbi Gamliel Haya Omer, Kol Shlai Amar Shloisha Dvarim Elu B'Pesach La Yatsa Yidei Chayvasei. Now think about it. Remember the story? After Rabbi Gamliel asked Rabbi Yeshua for forgiveness, so now the question is, so who should be the Nasi? You can't remove Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria completely, Malan B'Kodesh Ve'ein Moiridin, the Gemara says. So they came up with the following approach. Rabbi Gamliel is going to rule 3 Shabbosim, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria will rule 1 Shabbos. And lo and behold, by the end of the Seder, look who's back in action. Amar Rabban Gamliel, Kol Shaloi Amar Shloisha Dvarim Elu B'Pesach La Yatsa Yidei Chava. It's exactly parallel to the famous story in Brachas. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria gets in 1 halacha in the beginning of the Seder, and that is that you have to maskir in Yitzias Mitzrayim Baleilos, and at the end of the Seder, like in the Gemara and Brachas, Rabban Gamliel Kol Shaloi Amar Shloisha Dvarim, because Rabban Gamliel's back in action. Now, how did Rabban Gamliel get back in? He said, B'moichel mi leman kvoid Beis Avi. Who was his father that he's referring to? His Zayda, Hillel. So, of course, the other Tana brought in the Haggadah is Zecher Lemikdash Kehillel. The Haggadah Shel Pesach seems to be structured based on the famous episode and saga in the Gemara Brachas Daf Chav Ches between Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria and Rabban Gamliel, where at the beginning of the night, we got to open the door. It's an open door policy. All children are allowed in. All children are given a seat. All children are given a front row seat. The only way to get the tam, the Sheni Yodei Lishal, and the Rasha to the table is Rabban Gamliel is demoted for a short period of time. And I think a very powerful remez to this. There's Rav Asher Weiss brings this in his Haggadah, but it comes from Rav Nachman of Breslov. He says when the Talmidim came to the 5 Tanaim and they said, Higi Azman Kriya Shema Shel Shachris. Shachris, Rav Nachman says, is a Rashi Tevos for the Arba Banim. Chacham, Rasha, Tam, She'eni Yodei Elishal. Shachris, She'eni Yodei Elishal, Chacham, Rasha, Tam. In other words, now that we've demoted Rabban Gamliel, Higia Zeman Kriya Shema Shel Shachris, we could inculcate the Amunah of Kriya Shema in all of our children. And this seems to be the opening of Haggadah Shel Pesach. So the episode in Masechta Brachos of Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azaria, sort of is reenacted in the structure of the Haggadah. And this is a critical attitude to begin the Haggadah with, that V'ha'amidu talmidim harbe. So to speak, whatever our standards are the rest of the year, we have a different approach to the night of the Seder. It's an open door policy. We bring everybody into the house. We bring everybody to the table. Everybody is equally valued. Everybody is equally cherished. By the end of the night, once we're ready for Geula, we bring Rabban Gamliel back at it. He comes back to the helm. He gets his 3 Shabbosim. And by the way, this is very interesting. This accounts for the 2 approaches. The 5 Tanam, they're Mesaprim B'tzias Mitzrayim, narrative, story. Rabban Gamliel, no, look in the Tosefta. Rabban Gamliel learned halacha the whole night. That was the approach of Rabban Gamliel. By the way, one little tidbit. You could look in the entire Pirkei Avos, there's only one Tana that's not mentioned. Rabban Gamliel. Why? Because Rabban Gamliel doesn't tell stories, and he's not teaching Agadata. Rabban Gamliel is a man of halacha. He's Yikov Hadin Sahar. He's brought in at the end of the Haggadah. So to speak, the highest madrega is when we could bring in all the banim, elevate them to the status of chacham, and learn halacha. But by the beginning of the night, it's v'hayu misaprim b'yitzias Mitzrayim kol oisai halayla. So I thank everybody for the great opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. Bershus all the Chasheva Rabbanim and speakers. I wish everybody Chag Chasheva Sameach and a wonderful Yom Tov. And we should be Zoicha that all of our Banim should be elevated to the status of V'chol Banayich Limudei Hashem. Thank you very much. Hagun Yom Tov.
Rabbi Glatstein, thank you, Rabbi Bergman, Rabbi Krohn, Rabbi Schechter, Rabbi Besser, Rabbi Shoshan, thank you, Rabbi Glatstein, Shperich, everyone, Chag Kosher V'Sameach, thank you for joining.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.